And we are now live. All right, welcome everybody to our first virtual town hall. My name is Shayna Weintraub, and I do the social media for Senator Conley's re-election campaign. We're glad to have all of you here this evening. Thank you for coming out. It is a very nice Friday night, and so we were lucky to have you here. We also have guests tonight. We have Onna Moniz-John, who is a community leader and activist, and Aiyah Josiah-Faeduwor, who is a former board member and executive director of Millennial, Rhode Island, a former Providence school board member, and the current master's in city planning and MBA dual degree candidate at MIT. So tonight we'll be discussing the Black Lives Matter movement and also the supplemental budget. Our schedule will have us first hear from Senator Conley, and then we'll give the floor to Onna and then Aiyah. Following this, Senator Conley will be answering questions that were submitted to us in the past couple weeks. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll try to get them to this conversation tonight. If not, we will get them to you in the next week. Without further ado, Senator Conley.
Thank you very much, Shayna. First, welcome to my guests and welcome to all of you who are joining this town hall meeting. Again, thank you for taking the time to do this on a beautiful Friday night. I've just declared my candidacy for re-election this week, and
congrats.
Thank you, and I'm excited about it too. You know, I want to continue to advocate for the people in my district about the issues that I know that are important to them, and to many Rhode Islanders as well. You know, first of all, education. Education is the foundation of the superstructure of Rhode Island's future. And even in these difficult and challenging times, we cannot lose sight of that. But that foundation needs support. It needs the support of early childhood learning and access to affordable child care. That also needs the support of access to affordable and high quality health care. That's one of the reasons why during my time in the Senate, I have advocated, along with many of my colleagues, that essential benefits be included in our Rhode Island health insurance programs. The other issues that I know will continue to be a priority for me and frankly many of my colleagues in the Senate will be affordable workforce housing. We need to continue our skill building and job training programs, and particularly as we transition through our reopening recovery, which is frankly going pretty well in Rhode Island. We look around what's going on in the rest of the country. But as we do that, we also need to focus on initiatives to support small businesses that have been hurt through this process. And we've learned more than ever that those small businesses are the heart and soul of not only our commerce and our economy, but family structure and frankly, an important part of how we continue to get to know each other in our communities. So this will not be my usual campaign. Unfortunately, I will not be getting out to these community events that are all over Rhode Island and all over East Providence and Pawtucket, especially in our beautiful summers. And I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss those times. And I won't be going door to door because your safety and your health are certainly the primary concern throughout this campaign process. But I am excited about getting to know all of you through social media. And I've learned that it's a great way, to continue that conversation. And I know that the most important element of any conversation is listening. So because of that, I'm going to stop talking now. And I'm going to turn to my guests. I know that Shayna introduced them a moment ago, but I want to say a little bit about why I asked them to be here this evening. So I know I've known Onna and really all of her family for most of my life as well. But I became closer as friends, and really she became a mentor in my life during the time we worked together in local government in East Providence. And again, inspired by her leadership and inspired by what she did to bring East Providence together as a community during some significant events that she and I worked through together. So, Aiyah is a more recent friend. I first met Aiyah through his membership in Millennial, Rhode Island, first executive director of Millennial, Rhode Island. And it's been great to have his friendship and have conversations with Aiyah. And he brings yet another perspective of learning and mentorship to me. And I'm very appreciative of that. So with that, I do want to sort of, Onna, ask you to join in.
Okay.
And tell us a little bit about, let's talk about your experiences, our experiences in Providence as we've dealt with this issue.
Well, I've had a lot of different experiences, and it's not because of being female. I think about my experience in the public school systems. I'm born and raised in East Providence. We go back many generations.
Yep.
Something that was very funny, my great-grandmother was a bootlegger. Yeah.
Right.
And my uncle, they used to run whiskey from East Providence up to the Cape. Sundays, the local police that crossed the streets every day always stopped over to have their little drink in a coffee pot. So I say that because there was some kind of a relationship formed. But going to school, it was very different. I didn't experience problems with other students. Most of the problems we went through were systematic problems. They weren't in your face. It was systematic, and you knew it. It was in school, at home. I've always said, I learned at a very early age that color matters. My first experience about realizing my color, I was probably 4 or 5. And my older sister took me to the store with her. We just went right up the street, Angelo's Market. We get there, and my sister is very light. He's holding my hand, and we go there, and he asked her, "Who's that?" And she said, "Oh, my little sister. I'm teaching her how to cross the street." And he says right away, "That cannot be your sister. She's colored, and you're not." And I listened, and I paid attention, and I knew. And then when you got into the school system, all of that was reinforced. You knew you were different. We usually had maybe 1 or 2 people of color in our classrooms, and that was difficult. I see so much hope in this Black Life movement. I see a lot of hope because I see multiracial, multi-generational people from all walks of life out there protesting. And I think that's a real big difference from what we went through in the 60s. Going through school, it was difficult. I had some friends. We went to a class reunion, I'm going to say 3-4 years ago. It was a big number. And at the class reunion, I met up with some old buddies and young people that I hadn't seen since junior high school. And the title of our reunion was From Princess Phones to Cell Phones. And we worked with the high school kids. We had high school kids participate with us on a panel. And we were going back and forth. And I brought up the subject of lunchtime and the black table. My friend said, "What do you mean the black table?" I said, "Well, we always sat at the black table." And they said, "What is the black table?" I said, "Well, when we went to school, we always knew where to sit. And it wasn't where we could sit. It was where we chose to sit. It was just dubbed the black table. We went into school in the black door. When we came out, we went out the black door, which was right by Big Dipper. Do you remember Big Dipper?
Absolutely.
Well, that door over there, that was the black door, Bill. And you're going to be just like my friend. They said, "What? What do you mean the black door?" See, they had absolutely no sense of some of the things that we were going through. And that's what I found a lot of change right now. people of color and white people are now talking about these things. We never talked about it all these years. And they wanted to know, explain this to me. And I said, well, the easiest explanation is safety in numbers. Everybody sits with people they know. Everybody sits with people they're comfortable with. Going through school, and it started right away. Nobody even told me. You just gravitated. And then you found out that's the black table. Then you found out that's the black door. I mean, those kinds of things. Systematic things, chosen things. Systematically, cheerleading is a big deal. And I know it might sound a little deal to all you guys, but you have daughters, wives, sisters. Everybody knows cheerleading is huge. Always was. We couldn't be cheerleaders. And that was hard. They had just begun to break that barrier. And I know one or two people before me who were very fair-skinned that got to be cheerleaders. And the hard part about that is I was a good cheerleader, basically because of our park system. You know how Providence has the parks? Well, we had competition. You practiced all summer long.
I remember those well.
You remember them well. And we were knocking parks off. We won. At one point, you know, they were sick of us. You know, we were winning every year, but in the beginning, we had to go through some trauma where we were disqualified for being sexy. You know, like 8, 9-year-olds.
Now you get extra points.
We had a good start at being sexy, but we were disqualified. And then as the years went on, you know, and the judges changed, and along came a wonderful teacher. Is it okay if I drop a name?
Sure.
Mrs. Sullivan.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
what a wonderful woman. So for every negative, back then we had a positive. We were blowing these kids away at parks. The first year when we were disqualified for being sexy, she sat with us and talked with us. So we did come back. And year after year after year, not only did we win softball, but we were winning cheerleading. Big girls, little girls.
But then when you get to high school.
No, before high school.
No,
You get to junior high. You're at
Oh,
a very tender, impressionable age.
Yep.
I mean, you're 12, 13, and you go out and it happens. Where the institutional racism, systemic racism, it kills your desire.
Yeah. Wow.
When we had competition, again, all the black people sat together, and one by one, my friends got plucked off, and we knew we were good. One by one, and it got down to the semifinals, and who's still there? I'm excited. They're excited for me, and it was just a row of us, and I made it. I made it. They got the number. I made it. We were happy. They were hugging me. We were we were so happy. And then out of nowhere, they stopped it because they said it was a mistake. They selected one too many. And you know, my gut hit the floor. I knew before I got there, because of the system and the things that you go through, I knew it was me. And guess what, Bill? Guess what they knocked me out for? Smiling too much.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, if a cheerleader doesn't smile.
You've had the best smile in East Providence for a long time, so.
Well, I don't know, but I never knew it was a
I'm
deficit.
so sorry, Anna.
They knocked me out for smiling, but Mr. Sullivan, devastated. When I got to high school, she offered me a job. They had Job Corps then. She offered me a job. She put me in the office of that high school. But she said, you have to try out for cheerleading, because I didn't do it again. I would not do it as a 9th grader. I wouldn't. And she gave me the job, but I told her I can't take the job. And she said, why? I said, I won't do it. I will not. And at that point, I still wouldn't do it. I did not trust the system. And see, that's where the problems come in. What does it do? I mean, so I wasn't a cheerleader, big deal. But what it does is it teaches you mistrust. You can't count on it. And even with an advocate like Mrs. Sullivan, I couldn't get through that. But me being me, I didn't care. I moved on to the next. But I was also one heck of a ball player. First base, fourth batter.
Yeah.
Clean up all the time. And guess what? You know there's little parks at Hull Street and that park at PSV. I put it out of all those parks. And I'm ambidextrous. We had a coach, Ernie Duart's father. You know what he used to tell me? Take two and go left.
Yeah, well, I gotta connect just because the last time I was down on Hull Street, I was down there getting batting practice.
Could you hit it over the fence?
And Dennis was pitching.
Oh, what a sight! But once again, all those skills.
Yeah.
I didn't go out for ball playing in high school. I wouldn't play on the ball team. Take that chance. Yet I played ball for the state. I played in East Providence League. I played every league possible, but I wouldn't play. I didn't trust it. And those are the bad things. And, you know, I had a really good time explaining this to my schoolmates later in life. And it devastated them. I will be honest. It devastated them. And one of them, she was the cheerleader of cheerleaders. She said, how come I didn't know, Anna? How come I didn't know? How come you didn't tell me? And see, those are the kinds of things you just keep inside. Yeah. And they do fester because it carried me from junior high to high school. I kept going. That's why this movement now is so different. Millennials are paying attention. Millennials are holding hands and they mean it. They're learning. They feel, I mean, you have white brothers and black sisters and people are really coming together. And I think this time we're going to see change. When people listen to these stories, and you know what, it's funny. I brought the mobile museum to the State House probably 2 months later. And don't you know, those same 3 girls from my reunion who were cheerleaders, I'm up there, they're showing up. They just wanted to show support. And I think that's really key and really important. Hi, Marshall.
Yeah.
So Anna, again, okay, I don't want to interrupt, and
you have to.
Thank you. I guess. But I do want to turn to Aiyah and welcome him to the conversation. And
hi, Aiyah. I don't really know you, and I hope to get to know you better right now.
Go ahead.
I'm just honored to, be a part of this conversation. With everything going on in the world right now, there is so much that we're missing out on, and so much that's not happening the way that it did. But I mean, conversations like this, being here with all of you leaders, legends, community pillars. This is a really exciting opportunity. I'm just honored to be here and to offer, my own perspective on this. But I just wanted to thank you all for just being the members of the community that you've been and for sharing your stories and your perspectives. A little about me. So yes, I've met Senator Conley through the Millennial stuff, and his son, Dylan, is a really good friend of mine, and we've been doing the Millennial stuff together, and he's now currently running for Congress, following in the family footsteps, which is really, really amazing. So yeah, I'm here in Providence. I've been in Providence for the past about 10 years now going on. I came here in 2009 to go to Brown, and I got off the hill and ate somewhere on Broad Street. I forget where it was, but after being in that community, I was like, I don't want to go back to Boston. I appreciated my upbringing and everything like that in Boston, but Providence just was a city that just felt more like home to me. The people here just really were warm and welcoming. And I think there was just, as I was getting into policy and political work, there was just a feeling that this community was really ready to push for change and was really excited, and was still in its renaissance, which was also really amazing. But some of my background in particular, like what we're talking about, Black Lives Matter and Black experience. I was raised by a single dad. He was from Sierra Leone, West Africa, came to the States in the 70s to go to school. He ended up amassing about 5 degrees across engineering, math fields, just like his nickname in school was the brain. Like, he was just a very smart guy, just loved, really valued and appreciated education. He had lived that work. He was in school until he was 30. And so him and my mom ended up having a tough relationship and just custody battles and all that stuff. Me and my 4 other siblings, so there were 5 of us, 2 older brothers, 2 younger sisters, kind of went through all of that, and ended up being under his care. Now, as a young kid, I guess my beginning to understand how race played a role in our lives and how the systemic piece came into play. It was an over time understanding. But I think one of the things that really became a part of my life was that me and my 2 older brothers, essentially, I watched their pathways and learned how I had to kind of navigate this world based off their experiences. Um, and they had trouble in school oftentimes, and that trouble in school led to being disciplined and led to, issues that pushed them away from school. And ultimately, by the time I was middle school age, I saw that because they didn't have the same experience in school, I do think I took from my dad and gravitated towards academics like a little bit more naturally. I just really saw the consequences of if I wasn't focused in school a lot more clearly. So by not being as focused in school, they gravitated towards the streets. And this was growing up in Boston and things like that, and low income communities, and subsidized housing. We know what's happening in these neighborhoods. And both of my brothers ended up being incarcerated before I graduated from high school. And watching that path for them really at a young age, for me, instilled what felt like only had 2 options. Either I gravitated towards this academic stuff and I propelled myself to, you know, a career path like my dad's or something like that. This was the only other option for me. And so I think there's a very systemic and there's very, very personal and social aspects of what Black Lives Matter is trying to uplift and speak to about the Black experience. But just from a personal experience for me, being Black, being a young Black man in the context I grew up was about outcomes and was about like the limited constrained choices I felt like I had. I later on in life and what I watched on TV and what I understood of other people's lives was, a lot more choice. Like, oh, I could have played sports because I just enjoyed them, or I could have, found a talent or a passion like music or something like that, and just embraced that. But for me, and my dad was a part of this. The only choices I could make in terms of where to focus my life were choices that would ensure that I didn't end up down the pathway of my brothers. Could play football, but if you're not gonna become, you're not gonna get into the NFL, why are you playing football? That's literally a conversation I had with my dad. And as a kid, I was like, why are you not letting me play sports? All of my friends are doing it. But later on, and like now, in hindsight, I understood ultimately he was trying to protect my own future. So I followed down the, academic pathway, ended up, going to a place like Brown. And, I think the unfortunate reality getting, I look in hindsight was that's what I had to do to avoid the path that my brothers had gone down, right? Like getting into a place like Brown, right? And this is an extreme privilege, but this is one of the only sure pathways to not ending up down a criminal pathway if you're growing up in a neighborhood like that, not ending up in a loop of generational poverty. So these systemic things are big and are real, but they also are very personal experiences that individuals have to navigate, and that's what I had to do to get out of that. And I think what's even more interesting is that these things, different neighborhoods deal with these problems differently. Different people navigate these things differently. Yes, when I was growing up in that community, I was targeted by police. I was stopped, police did come when me and friends were playing basketball at a basketball court when the sun went down. And police were there because they're saying you're not allowed to be in this park when the sun goes down. And then me and other teenagers, our IDs are taken and our socials are ran to see if we have any records, you know, like for that to feel normal at the age of 16, you know, where police come and just feel like extreme invasion of your peace, your privacy, your feeling of belonging, right? You're just sitting there in your own neighborhood basketball court and feeling like you don't belong. Like I did something wrong by being a kid who's playing basketball until the sun goes down, you know? And so I think I had those experiences, and what changed about that was going to a place like Brown. Everything about that experience, you know, just obviously I was talking differently, I was dressing differently, and I had an affiliation that was different. That's what protected me, right? So ever since going to Brown, police approached me and treated me differently. I could tell stories here, but I probably shouldn't. On times when I was doing things that definitely should have warranted police involvement, but because of the entire context of who I was or who I am now, I was left alone. You know, I was let off with a warning. You know, I was treated very differently. And I understood all of that was the way that I present myself. And that level of protection is something that obviously I'm fortunate to have, but it's unfortunate that that's not an option for a lot of people, not an option for a lot of folks. And that shouldn't be what it takes to be able to know that you're going to be safe and secure in life.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You're the young person in the room. So you can't make a comparison like we can from the 60s to now. You're a millennial. You're with young people from all walks of life, countries. Do you feel that the movement and all the things that they are doing, do you feel that genuine connection?
Yeah, I do. And
that's the change.
Right.
See, you are part of the change that we're waiting for.
Right.
That connection.
Yeah, and it's important. And, you know, I do feel right now more hopeful. I do feel more involved. And I do feel that we're going to see substantive change from everything that's happening, you know, but ultimately no problem is going to fix all of the problems, right? And, you know, we're going to be able to get to an aspect of the system. But I think a lot of this goes to the human level. We have policy things, we have politics to fix, but there is a human level piece that I think we all just have to also take into consideration, right? Like I am watching and learning and hearing about how so many Black women, how queer people of color, how trans women are living life. And there are things that we're not talking about that's happening within these communities. There's things that we're not addressing. And, you know, no matter how much we work to solve the current big problem, we have to like remember and be as like considerate of everyone and what they're going through and things that we don't know about. So I think the key is conversations like this. The key is having people share their experience.
I agree.
Empathy and understanding, because the only way we can actually fix our problems is if we know about all of them. And I don't think
we have to talk about it.
We have to talk about them and we have to get them out. Yeah, so that's my story for the most part. That's, you know, what I think I bring to these conversations is just, you know, I
also bring youth.
Yes. As you bring some youth.
Yes, for now, you know, I've lost the hair already. You know, at some point soon, it's gonna start to show that, you know, I'm not as young as I used to be, but I'm happy to be where I am. I'm not.
It's a tremendous perspective, and Onna, you stole my question. You stole my question because I think the value of not only these conversations, but the value, it's also across the generations of the people that have lived the experience. You know, one of the things you said, Onna, that just gave me goosebumps when you said it. I suppose I've heard it in other ways, but at this moment in time, hearing from you that what that implicit and what that systemic racism does is that it kills your desire. It kills your desire. And it made me feel at that moment how many great spirits we lost because
how much talent
that systemic
got overlooked
just took the desire away from them.
Right.
And you know, I'm sure that I've kind of heard that said in other ways, but at this moment, when you said that, I think it really sort of hit the core for me of what happens because of that implicit and systemic racism. And then to hear, you're right, and then to hear Aiyah tell us, but you know what? We're in a hopeful moment.
Exactly.
We're in a moment where we can change that. And that these kinds of conversations have to continue because that's how we're going to get it changed.
Well, the conversations matter. I mean, we've been friends for a million years, co-workers. You probably are just as stunned as my classmates were.
Yeah.
How come I didn't know?
Yep.
But how could you know?
Yeah, I think one question I actually have for you, I know there's also a Q&A set up, but I'm just curious, you know, we want to, as the younger generation, we want to learn as much from you all, you know, folks who've been fighting, but how do you all feel that, like, the things that you've really spent your life fighting for, do you feel like you've seen substantive change over
Your change.
as products of your fights?
You are a product of it.
Great to hear. That is
Thank you.
absolutely great to hear.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Ramos.
Thank you to Aiyah, Onna, for your stories and sharing your experiences. We're very lucky to have you here on this call and sharing this discussion as a multi-generational discussion. So without further ado, we are going to begin the Q&A session, and I invite Aiyah and Onna to stay on the call so that you can join in the conversation as well if you have anything to contribute. So these questions came to us within the past 2 weeks, and I'm going to go down the list, starting with the question, are you planning on working on bills that have positive racial content to improve relationships between races here in Rhode Island?
So, thanks for the question, Shana. Well, you know, one of the things we just learned in this conversation is that the racism is systemic and is pervasive. So when you talk about working on bills to address it, what that really means is that really, I mean, social justice has to become a core value of governing. Each and every bill that we pass, we now know needs to be scrutinized from a perspective that we probably haven't before, and that's that important social justice perspective. It goes across all the things I talked about when I first started tonight about what's important in my district and the people I represent: housing, education, healthcare, jobs, childcare, to be addressed at single aspect of our societal structure and how we govern. So it's more than the task is more than just sort of identifying, you know, a series of silver bullet bills. They don't exist. It's really about making sure that you stay the course and keep your eye on the prize through all of the legislative process.
Thank you. The next question is, would you support a constitutional convention?
That's a really interesting question, because I will candidly admit, as we have this discussion this evening, I am not aware of a specific issue that would warrant an entire an entire constitutional convention. I do think we need to look at some constitutional amendments. I would love to see education be made a constitutional right in our state. I'd listen to the conversation about why we needed a constitutional convention, and I'm certainly open to it if there's enough sufficient reason to have one.
Thank you. The next question is, would you consider having a debate with your opponent?
Oh, absolutely. I love debating. And seriously, there's nothing better for democracy than a lively discussion of issues in the public square. Typically, in our races, the League of Women Voters organizes the debates. And I have every reason to expect that we'll do it again. as we can just see from this conversation tonight, that's something you can accomplish through this technology if you can't get everybody into the Martin Junior High auditorium again this year. But yes, I enjoy debating. I enjoy discussing these public issues. And it is that process, that discussion of these important public issues on the village green, in the public square, that inform us about what's important to our constituents and inform us about what we need to do when we get back into that General Assembly in January.
Thank you. The next question is, do you support repealing Rhode Island General Law 42-286 titled the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights?
Well, you know, I'm pretty familiar with the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights because in my work as a lawyer, I represent municipalities prosecuting cases under that. With all the attention on it recently, I certainly have my own opinions about, in that role, prosecuting those cases, what could be done to improve it. But the conversation about it obviously is more than that now. Last week, I had a discussion with a couple of people that I thought would be important to talk to about it. And that's Jim Vincent from the NAACP, the president, and with Charles Wilson, who is the chair of the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers. And I wanted to start that conversation with them last week because we have a Senate task force. It's going to be chaired by Senator Metz. That is also going to look at Leobor and look at what needs to be done there. And hearing from Jim and hearing from Charles about their specific concerns and they intend to participate. They intend to be heard in those hearings. They've already told me that. Sort of starts to give me direction. I can say this, and I know these are political buzzwords, but they become buzzwords because they mean something. Clearly, transparency and accountability have to become a part of that process that we don't have now. And until, what I really think is discussion with people like Jim and Charles and Senator Metz's task force will find out what the best practices are to achieve that and the reforms necessary to get that accountability in there. So yes, I do support looking at it very carefully. It does need to be reformed.
Thank you. We have one more question, and that is, why is Rumford a part of your district?
I think I'm going to let Dr. Ramus and Onna handle that one. So East Providence is a lot of villages. It's Riverside, Suttonville, although you don't hear people talk about Suttonville and Phillipsdale. You don't hear people talk about Suttonville and Phillipsdale.
Don't hear that anymore.
Right. Kent Heights, and Rumford. Rumford is one of the original villages of the city of East Providence. Back at the time, right after this area was settled, Rumford was one of the original villages, and it's part of the district because it's one of the many villages in the city of East Providence. But that is one of the unifying things about our high school, though. It does at that age, it does bring all those villages together at a place. And Onna, you're still over on Anthony Street, right?
Yeah, but if you remember, we were cut off. I don't know what kind of knives or markers they had at the State House. If you remember, District 84, the center was cut. And I was included with parts of the east side, parts of South Providence. Whoever drew that line, or whatever reason they drew it crooked, I mean, they ignored natural boundaries, which is supposed to be something you didn't do. I mean, if the river is not a natural boundary, I don't know what is.
Yeah, well,
we were thrown into that whole part.
I remember
and
when
then they realized City Hall was included in that. I think from there you can just try to figure out that puzzle.
Yeah.
And I think we gave you a headache because you don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, sorry about that, Shana, but that
but
just
strange things can happen when you draw a line.
Think about that question causes all to think about all of that section.
But I'm still on the same street.
Yeah. A lot of nooks and crannies in East Providence.
Districts changed, but the streets are still there.
Thank you. Thank you for all joining in on that question. We only have a couple minutes left, and so Senator Conley, do you have any closing remarks that you would like to make?
Well, we didn't get a chance to talk about the supplemental budget, so which is, and frankly, in a few days it's over. Our most important goal there was to make sure that we completely funded the schools for the rest of the year, which we did, and frankly, to protect the cities and towns, because when we don't get that aid to the cities and towns, their only resort is to raise property taxes, which is a disaster.
Yeah.
The upcoming budget, we're going to be back in a few weeks. Frankly, we really need the HEROES Act that has passed in the Democratic House of Representatives to get passed. That partisanship in the Senate, the politics they're playing with it. It's not a political issue. We're talking about people's lives. We're talking about those small. We're talking about programs for the most vulnerable. We're talking about taking care of people who are facing unemployment that frankly had worked their whole lives or are just barely getting by before unemployment. And so we need that HEROES Act to pass. We need essentially, when we get back in session, we look at that budget, we need to use that money wisely. And again, to get back to one of the points from one of the questions earlier, when we do that, social justice and equity need to be a core value of what we do with those funds.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. It's important.
Yeah, thank you, Onna. Thanks, Aiyah. Thanks.
Thank you, Aiyah.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you all.
No, I do.
Thank you for everybody online who joined us tonight, and we hope to see you at future virtual town halls. Stay tuned and check out our social media accounts so you can see the dates for that and the topics.
Yeah, just one last word is this is the beginning of the conversation, this campaign. Get online, get on social media so I can continue to have this conversation with you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.